Well, good morning, everyone. By the time you get to hear this interview, we possibly will be talking about the gentleman that I'm going to introduce, not just being the lone finalist for Killeen ISD superintendent, but perhaps having been named as the superintendent. This morning, we have the distinct pleasure and honor to be in conversation with Dr. King Davis. And I just want to share just a little bit about him before we turn this over to him, because we want to hear his thoughts on where our school district currently stands and where it is headed. So all of you in the Central Texas area who should be concerned about what's happening with our young people and how we're preparing them for the future, tune in. So Dr. King Davis currently serves as interim superintendent of Killeen ISD. And as I stated earlier, he has been named as the lone finalist for that position. He brings more than 30 years of experience in public education and a proven record of strong leadership, academic growth, and community engagement. And I can say that he is definitely an example of Black don't crack, because 30 years where? Okay. He most recently led Sheldon ISD as superintendent for 8 years, where he guided the district from improvement required to a consistent B rating and resolved an $11 million budget deficit in a single fiscal year. I don't know how he did that, but we're going to find out. And prior to Sheldon, Dr. Davis served as superintendent of Wharton ISD, deputy superintendent in Everman ISD, and assistant superintendent in Crosby ISD. And we could go on and on. But one of the things that you have said, Dr. Davis, is that you are a firm believer in the power of schools and communities working together, and that strong communities build strong schools, and strong schools build strong communities. Dr. Davis, welcome to Rethinking Freedom.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
You are very welcome. Now, for all of our regular listeners and for those of you who are new, Rethinking Freedom is a platform where we simply have the conversations about what does freedom mean to us? What does it look like? And what role should we be playing to advance our concept of freedom? And certainly, I hope that everyone listening and watching, if you're watching on the YouTube side, will agree that educating and providing opportunities for our children to learn, and there's actually a difference, matters. And so, Dr. Davis, let's start with just asking you, what is your definition of education? And I did note that for the mission statement for Killeen ISD, they actually don't use educate, which I appreciate. It says teach so that students learn to their maximum potential. But what is your definition of what education should be, or what learning should be, and what you particularly would like to see in Killeen ISD?
Sure. Thank you again. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to sharing more with the community and this platform and others. What is education to me? So the simplified for me, education ultimately, in my mind, in my view, is how do we go about as an educational system, as children matriculate through our system or any system, is how do we help children find their path? How do we help children find their pathway through different means, so as they exit our educational systems, that they, one of three things, either enter the workforce in some viable career where they can become productive citizens, have a viable way of taking care of themselves and or family, enter the workforce right after their conclusion of their education career, and or enter college or some higher education environment, or go and serve into our military services. So ultimately, how do we create a system, a robust system, where children find their individual pathway? That's ultimately, in my mind, my view of the what our charge is in education. Because once the children matriculates through any educational system, if they have not found their way into adulthood for a viable career, higher educational institution, whatever path they so choose, them and their parents, that's our charge to ensure that we help and guide, ensure children find their pathway. And that's ultimate. I'm excited about the pendulum shift over the last 5 to 10 years. We had gone to, of course, over time, you have different pendulum shifts in education. And so what I mean by that, with my 55-year-old self, during my time in school, there was we used to have what's called vocational education, which is now synonymous to CTE, career and technical education. And I'm glad to see that we're getting back to that as it relates to a focus on it. Because there was a time from vocational ed, then we transitioned to all things higher ed, that if children weren't transitioning from high school to college, that they were failures, that they could not contribute successfully or transition successfully to society. And that's not necessarily true. Not all of our children will choose to transition from high school to college. Some will choose to enter a trade. Some will choose to acquire some type of certification or licensure to where they can enter the workforce right away. So that's part of our charge. Some children you'll choose to go serve our military. So there's many different ways where children can transition from their educational journey in public ed or private ed or whatever their choice, and become viable citizens and have a viable way of taking care of themselves and their family. So hopefully that makes sense. So that's my version of it.
It absolutely does make sense. It brings up a lot of questions for me.
Sure.
So as you look at Killeen ISD and where we are today, and if that is the vision, if that is how we're defining success at this time, because of course we know we've kind of been very centered on testing, not something
Right.
unique to Killeen ISD, obviously, because we take marching orders from others way beyond where we are. But
Sure.
what would you consider so far Killeen ISD's top 3 strengths in terms of being able to deliver what you just described as your way of determining that we are doing a good job? So essentially, if we are matriculating students through our system, as you called it, and they are not prepared to either go to work and be productive right out of high school, go on to college and advance their education, to go on to become, to contribute in other ways, or go in to serve in our military. If we say, if they're not achieving those 3 things, it looks like we kind of dropped the ball. We failed our students.
Right.
What would you consider our top 3 strengths in our district at this time?
Yeah, top 3 shit. First of all, I would just say, as a community district, the community at large, I would say that the community's diversity. I think it's critically important that children, as they grow, see a diverse. And when I say diversity, I don't just mean by way of race. I'm talking about in other areas. We have people who from different parts of this country that's a part of this community by way of our military. We collaborate as a school district off base and on base as it relates to that collaboration with our military. And so I would say our diversity in many ways is a beautiful thing, and what children can really have an opportunity to see so many different things, so many different cultures, so many different things as relates to truly learn and glean lots of things as it relates to the makeup of our community. I will also say, as it relates to just the quality of the people here. I mean, of course, I've only been here 3 months, but I'm still learning and growing as it relates to listening and learning and gleaning more information from our community members and our school community. But I would say the folks are really focused and truly bought in to Killeen ISD and to our community at large. And so that's been refreshing for me, because we have a lot of hard work ahead of us. And so it's critically important that we have the right people and we have the right focus. And so I'm excited to continue to learn and grow with those and partner with those folks who are here, who are truly committed to Killeen ISD, because it truly is going to take a commitment of the entire community to move things forward. And then lastly, I would say our students, again, overall, our students are ready, and they come every day and they're ready to push forward and do their part as it relates to, as I continue to visit with different students from our elementary to our high school level. They are truly plugged in. Again, although we have pockets of some concerns, I would say overall, our staff, our students, and the diversity of our community, school community, and our community at large is truly a refreshing and certainly some positive things for us to work toward. I mean, to help us to work toward the vision for the future.
Well, thank you for sharing that. As a mother who, let's see, I've 5 children. I've had 5 children either go through or currently in Killeen ISD from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. So I absolutely agree with you on the strengths that you identified. But it's interesting that you would identify diversity as a strength, given our current political situation where that seems to have been turned into a bad word. So I'm pleasantly, I'm glad to see that we have a superintendent, I'm going to just call it, you're the lone finalist, who sees that as an asset in all the facets of diversity. So a lot of times when people tell me I'm against DEI, I tell them, can you break down what DEI is and explain to me exactly which part you are not in favor of? So thank you for saying that. But one of the things you also pointed out is that you said, the quality of the people, and that we need committed people for the work, the challenges ahead. What are some of the challenges that you see facing Killeen ISD?
Sure. Yeah, we although there's some great things happening, we do have to face the brutal facts and deal with our current reality, right? And so I would say there's a few. One being from a financial perspective, right? Although the district has been very good stewards, so I want to make sure that I start with that. We've had a 20+ year A rating as it relates to what's called a first rating. That's how the TA, Texas Education Agency, goes about giving a letter grade for how we go about our financial stewardship. And that has been, the district has done a fabulous job. The board and the finance department have continuously received A ratings. That said, we are also dealing with our current reality as it relates to finances. As this community, being a military community, we're having a loss of impact aid, and so that is impacting our finances. And also, we have had about a 3 to 4 year consistent 3 to 4 year of drop in enrollment, right, in student enrollment. So that impacts funding as well as you lose student enrollment. So, for example, as compared to the same time last year, we are down about another 1,400 students. And so, again, that's impacting funding. And then I would say number 2 would be our school improvement. Again, I'm sure the community is well aware at this point. We have some pockets of historical failing campuses where we are in the 3rd year of consecutive Fs at campuses. And so that has spurred on some sanctions, if you will, from the Texas Education Agency that we are working through. And so we have to address some school improvement concerns in the district. And then also, I would say some staffing concerns, because this is a people-driven business. It's all about people, having high-performing teachers in every classroom, high-performing principals leading every campus, and support staff, and so on and so forth, district level staff. But what we're facing is also a teacher shortage. This is just not a Killeen ISD issue. We've had coming out of COVID, we've had a national teacher shortage issue, a statewide issue, and so Killeen ISD is not exempt from that. We are experiencing that as well. And so we have some concerns as it relates to some unfilled positions that we have to address. We also have a high number as it relates to novice teachers and our uncertified teachers that we have to address because the teaching pool has shrunk. And so districts around, again, nationally, statewide, we're competing for a shrinking workforce. So we're all scrambling, trying to incentivize and do all these unique things to try to attract teachers and other employees to our community and our district. So that's a challenge as well. So, and then I would say lastly would be, as we've just gone through the optimization process, which the board started that process prior to my arrival. as it relates to the optimization. Thus, the keyword or base word to that is to optimize, to, of course, to maximize or to make the best use of our resources, right? And so part of that loss in enrollment and some of our campuses only being at about 50% capacity, right? We have to be very careful and make sure it's, as far as costs lots of money to run a campus as it relates to utilities and staffing. And so when we're running a campus that's losing enrollment, it just makes financial sense to consolidate campuses and do some other things. So that's why we're going through this optimization process, and the board has had to make some decisions to close some campuses and be better stewards of the taxpayers' dollars as it relates to how we're running a district, as it relates to our resources and finances and what have you. So just in a nutshell, those I would say are some immediate challenges that we are facing. Again, that's some school improvement concerns, some financial, some loss of funding concerns, and again, some staffing concerns going forward. How do we grow our own and continue to build staff and attract high-performing teachers and principals and other staff to our community and to our district?
Okay, so I know my listeners, and I think they will want to hear. So, what is your take on each of these challenges? Let's start with the drop in student enrollment. What do you see driving this drop? Because on the other hand, we're hearing more people are moving into Texas. We're hearing our communities are growing. We need more infrastructure in other areas. What's driving the drop in student enrollment in our school district?
Yeah, and I certainly don't want to speculate. I need some more time there. I would tell you what some preliminary things. Recently, there was a demographic study, an update with a demographic study. One thing is a drop in birth rate, right? We know if folks are not having children, right? But it's taking time for that to be realized. So that's one thing that I've been made aware of. We just have a lower birth rate in our area. But also, I would say, as some of our constituents or parents or whomever are choosing to move out to some surrounding communities for whatever reason, and that's where I don't know the why as it relates to that. But then I will certainly want to be as transparent and blunt as I possibly can. I do believe we also, the Killeen community and Killeen ISD, have some perception issues that we have to overcome. And we have to own that and be transparent about it. And what I mean by that, having been here only for a short period of time, obviously we have to deal with some perception issues and change the narrative as it relates to Killeen ISD. Everyone's aware of the unfortunate incident that happened last school year with the death of that student. Also now we're dealing with some school improvement issues. Where we're addressing some things with the TEA, Texas Education Agency. So as you know, the TEA chose to take over the largest district in the state of Texas, which is Houston ISD. They recently made a decision to take over Fort Worth ISD, which is another very large district in our state, and some other districts are probably forthcoming to be taken over, right? Because there are some school improvement concerns. And so when we couple some things as it relates to what's happening within our community, within our school system, although there's some great things, right? We also have to deal with the brutal facts that we have some concerns, and we have to face that and there's a shared responsibility with all of us, and we can't do it alone as a school system. We need the help of our parents, our community partners, our parents, for instance, from a safety perspective. We need all parents checking their child's backpack before they exit their homes. We need all parents partnering with us to ensure that their children are coming to school ready to learn and do all the things we need them to do. And a great majority are. And I want to be clear. I would say 90+% of our students come to school every day ready to learn, to do what the right thing is to do. And no different than our faculty and staff. Oftentimes we get labeled based on a small percentage of bad actors, if you will, whether that be from a student perspective and or an adult perspective. And so that said, there's many different reasons why I believe it's happening. I won't say that definitively yet. I hadn't been here long enough quite, but those are some things anecdotally that I'm picking up on that we again, together have to begin to change the narrative and talk more about what's happening positive. We're not going to hide things. I'm going to be transparent. I can assure you of that. But I'm also asking our community, we also have to share the things that are going well in Killeen ISD and our community at large, because there are some folks outside of this community coming in with a fresh pair of eyes, coming in from being an outsider coming in. There are some perception issues that together we have to change, and we have to help build that narrative about our community, about our school system, because there are some really great things happening. Although two things can be true at the same time. We have some great things happening in our community and lots to be proud of. But what's also true, we have some things that we got to work on as well. And so we have to do both, tell our narrative, tell our story about what's happening well, and deal with the brutal facts of those things that aren't going so well. And we're going to do that in Killeen ISD.
I really appreciate the nuance with which you are addressing these issues, because so often it's like people on one camp versus the other. And like you rightly pointed out, more than one thing can be true at the same time. You know, I've had 4 children matriculate through Killeen ISD who are thriving, but I've also had moments when I have pulled them out of Killeen ISD when they, for a short period of time, went to Belton ISD, and for a different period of time where I homeschooled because of some of the challenges that I saw. And so I really appreciate the fact that, yes, we can celebrate the good that's happening, and there's plenty of good, and that at the same time we can acknowledge that some of our students are not being served. In fact, I was on a panel with a group of Black educators at a conference that they had a couple of weeks ago. And I said, you know, as a parent, I can say my children have thrived, but I also know the level of advocacy that I had to employ for them to thrive in the way they did. And what often concerns me is those children who are from homes where, for a variety of reasons, they don't have someone who can advocate for them at that same level. And making sure that we are wrapping our arms around all children, regardless of whether they have that parent who can take off from work and show up at school, and so on and so forth. So thank you for that part on what's happening with our drop in enrollment. And of course, for those of you listening, if the enrollment drops, the dollars that you get allocated drops as well. Do you see any concerns with this new voucher program that the state of Texas has, and also just the funding patterns for public education in the state of Texas? Do you see any issues with how that might be impacting Killeen ISD and your ability to teach so that students learn to their maximum potential?
Yeah, I think a voucher system, I would venture to say most public school educators have, I would say most of us, to speak for all of us, I think most of us have concerns about the voucher system, right? There are some implications as a result to the impact of public ed, right? When we're taking public ed dollars and basically privatizing those dollars, right? But the bottom line, it is what it is. The law has, we have to move forward. This is our current reality as it relates to vouchers. So how do we, and what we do, how do we deal with it? How do we move forward? So the bottom line, we're not afraid of competition. And that's what we've been saying. As a public school educator, it's not about being afraid. We can compete, whether it be a private school or charter school. We've never been afraid of competition. This is the concern, is about making sure the rules are applied equally.
I am so glad you said that, because when you said you were not afraid of competition, I'm like, wait a second. If one team,
that's right,
it's got a ball and chain attached to their leg, and it's like run down the field, and the other one is being given like extra jet packs to boost them, that's not a fair playing field. But please carry on.
That's exactly right. That's all we ask. That's all we've ever asked. Just make it a fair playing field. If you're gonna transfer public ed dollars to a private institution, they should have to play by the same rules. They should have to face the test, a very high stakes testing environment that we have to face every year, so on and so forth. They should have to accept every child that applies. We don't turn children away, ma'am. If you live within Killeen ISD, whether you don't speak the language, whether you need special ed services, whatever it is, we accept all children. We don't make excuses. We have to educate those children who fall within our boundaries. But the reality is the private institutions can turn children away. They can turn children away of come from certain environments that they don't want to educate. And so that's the problem that I have. Make the playing field, make it an even playing field, and game on. We're not afraid of competition. Just make it fair. Don't try to just pull out the best and brightest, or what you perceive to be the best and brightest, and just try to scalp off or pull in those children and then deny or refuse to take in some of the other children. And I'm not suggesting all private schools take on that approach, but the reality is that's part of the concern we have as public school educators. It's just making a fair playing field, and we can move forward from there.
All right. Well, thank you. And again,
Sure.
the goal here for all of you listening is for us to really get a better sense of what's going on. Like as depending on where you are in the community, you get a snapshot, and that kind of skews, understandably, your understanding of what's going on in the district. And my goal in speaking with our superintendent at this time is to help us get a better understanding of how he's seeing things, and then where we come into play. Because ultimately, if we live in this community, and shoot, if you just live in the world, you should want our young people to excel. Because I know I'm not getting any younger, and we're going to need these young people to step up and take care of us. At least I'm counting on it. But one of the challenges that you also raised was about staffing, and talking about teacher shortage. I will also add teacher burnout. Can you speak a little bit more to this as a challenge, and what steps you think can be taken to address this? Because I do hear, I have one child who is a junior at one of our high schools, and I do hear from him and from other students and parents about rotating teachers who are just coming in as subs. Sometimes when teachers do have health issues, because they're humans, then a class is kind of sitting in limbo and not getting the level of instruction that they should get for a certain time period. But I'm also hearing from teachers who are just saying, I felt called to this profession, but I am burnt out. Like the minute I have put in, quote unquote, my time and can retire, I'm out of here, which is horrible in the sense that we do need seasoned teachers to help mentor the younger teachers. But what do you see as the issue in this area, and how do we address it?
Well, I think this is definitely an issue, a concern for sure. That there's many reasons in my opinion, and so I'll touch on a few. It kind of it aligns with what we were talking about the narrative or perceptions. And so what has happened over the last few years or so, our profession has really been beat up, to be quite frank. I mean, when we talk about or as far as the narrative being out there such that we're failing children and we're doing all these things, I don't know of many teachers that wake up on any given day to want to come and fail children. I strongly believe the great majority of our teachers, not just in Killeen ISD, but throughout this country, come every single day to try to do what's best for children. And as it relates to over the years, there has been just put more and more on the teacher's plate as it relates to high stakes testing, as it relates to certain requirements. And oftentimes we are required as school districts. So there's more and more requirements over the years and things that teachers must do, they shall do. And so as a school system, we have to find ways to lighten that burden, take something off the teacher's plate, because it is a lot. And so I think that's part of, I believe that has translated into the teacher shortage. Teachers and some folks in the profession realize, well, I can go and work at Amazon or whatever else and make a very similar salary or more and not have to deal with that level of stress that comes along with the profession, right? And so that's where my hope is our state legislators and others will realize there's some unintended consequences as it relates to some legislation that comes, or that's being pushed down to school systems, because at the end of the day, this is a people-driven business, and if we don't have the people, and so it's some there's some unintended consequences with certain things that are pushed down to the school system, and I believe that's what we're seeing the results of that. And so, as it relates to what can we do now as a school system, let me say this too: as a school system, we certainly are trying to do some things. I would get into pay. Now, I will say that certain things are trying to be addressed as it relates to pay and things of that nature, environment. So there's many reasons I think teachers have left the profession. But so what are we doing to address it? So I truly believe teachers tend to thrive and desire to work in environments where they feel honored and respected. And so we're certainly going to be trying and continuing to work hard to create environments and a culture where teachers feel respected, they feel valued, and they understand that they're an environment and desire to be an environment that we're providing. And so we're going to continue to work toward that. I believe we're the highest, or certainly one of the highest paying districts in Region 12, which we're proud of that. And we're certainly going to continue to try to talk through that with our board. How can we, again, continue to pay teachers and other employees a very competitive wage? Although it's not about the money, but it's about the money. Sometimes we just got to be honest about that. People want to be paid the market value for doing a certain job, and we want to be very competitive in that market. And so we will continue to work through that. And so again, creating an environment, a culture, if you will, that teachers desire to work in, making sure they paid a great wage, a great salary, and making sure we support. I mean, the research is pretty clear. Teachers tend to want to pay, as long as you pay them a fair wage, fair salary. The other major pieces is that they want to feel supported and be in an environment where they feel valued. And so that's ultimately the pieces, right? And so that's why we got to keep working on that system. How do we support? And support can look in so many different ways. That means, how do we support them with discipline, make sure they're in a safe environment? How do we support them instructionally, making sure they have the resources and the time to prep and plan? So support, obviously, there's a lot that's falls under support, right? And so that comes in many different forms and can be viewed in many different ways.
How, and you've only been here for 3 months, so this might not be a fair question for you, but in what ways does the district seek to get input from the teachers on what they need? So I've been a consultant for many years, and it was always mind-boggling to me when I first started decades ago that an entity would pay me to come in and do some work and give them some feedback. And I would go and interview people that they already have on their payroll, their own staff. Accumulate information from them. Yes, I may add some other pieces, but the bulk of it would be, these are the people on the ground. These are the people actually doing the work. And these are their ideas. They've thought about them. They're living the problem. They've thought about the solutions. And when I present it, it's like, oh my God, you're so brilliant. And I'm like, actually, y'all could have saved yourselves a whole bunch of money. Right. You just had a mechanism where you talked to your own people. So I do understand that there are layers to this, and you have the TEA and you have the mandates coming, many unfunded mandates coming down from the legislators. But within Killeen ISD, talking about creating an environment where people feel supported, how do you currently go about eliciting information from teachers in a way where they don't feel like, if I say this, my job might be in jeopardy? Because that's also a concern in the climate we live in.
No, that's a great question, and I'm excited to. And you're right. I'm been here 3 months. And one of the first things I did was to push out an anonymous survey, and I emphasize anonymous because, to your point, oftentimes you don't get the real, the raw, the ugly, and unless folks really feel protected and sharing and voicing their true, authentic feelings about a thing. And so literally I just got, and it's been a lot, I got lots of responses. And so I've just just gotten results in, actually, that they were coming in for a while, and now we're trying to synthesize and disaggregate this data. It's taken a while. I'm literally in the throes of that right now. Are really getting feedback from our staff, and they were not shy about it. So I'm starting to look in that data. So ultimately, I'm looking for some common threads, some common themes, if you will, of what from our staff's perspective on what's going well to try to simplify this for the audience. It's really, for me, I'm trying to gather information from our staff district-wide, basically what's going well from their perspective, and then also what's not going so well, and really collect some common threads as far as identifying a list of things as it relates to, okay, these are some things our staff district has identified, and then begin to talk about solutions. How do we amplify or extend or even make better the things that are going well? How do we keep that going and build off of those things? Then those things that are not going so well, we're going to own it, and let's start talking about solution-oriented responses to those things. And so that's ultimately what will come from that, and we'll start attacking and addressing those things as we work through this. So I hope to have that formalized and completed by the time we return from Christmas, to really, because we're doing a deep dive, really gathering all that information and putting it together at this point. And so going forward, in addition to that, of course, we'll continue to, folks will have a voice. I will have I've created a principals advisory team. I'm allowing people to have voice in different ways and on different platforms to come before me, even with students. So everyone's going to have an opportunity to provide input and their thoughts and ideas as to how do we go forward, because it's important to have, again, all the voices at the table, diverse voices at the table, whether that be students, parents, and so on and so forth. And so there's going to be different avenues where folks can provide input as it relates to where we're headed as a district.
Again, glad to hear it. I've been in our community now for about 16 years. I have served on some committees within Killeen ISD. Again, more than one thing can be true at the same time. I've appreciated those opportunities, but there have been times when it felt like, yes, we want you in the room, and supposedly we're here to get your voice, but really, actually, we just want you to rubber stamp what we've already decided we want to do. And I've been on multiple committees that have just been disbanded without any real explanation. So hopefully, as you all go through this process, first with the staff, and as you said, with the community at large, that it doesn't just feel like what some of us have experienced in the past, where it's like, yeah, we want to hear from you, but we really don't want to hear from you. We just want to look like we're listening to you. The other challenge that you raised, you talked about school improvement, you talked about historically failing campuses. And that's definitely an area that I do hear parents very concerned about, in addition to the security concerns. I mean, we are all on pins and needles when we get these alerts, shut down, threats, whatever. But so far, what is your sense of why we have had these historically failing campuses? And besides just shutting a school and moving students around to other schools, what are the real issues that have impacted these schools that would cause so many of our students to underperform? And what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, so let me keep this simple. And anybody can go research data. It's not real complicated, as you can look across the state or across the country. And most of us would probably pretty quickly figure out, typically schools that traditionally have failing, who traditionally have this historical or history of failure, is typically have a certain makeup, and that primary makeup is a high economically disadvantaged student population. All right. And so again, I want to be clear, that doesn't mean children that's in impoverished communities can't learn, right? And so obviously those children have the capacity to learn, But what oftentimes happens, some of those children, because of their economically disadvantaged status, don't have access, or perhaps they're coming from an environment of dysfunction, or perhaps what we call the summer slide, right? During the summer, the 2 months we're out, right? Uh, they don't have access, or perhaps they're are not in environments where we're trying not to have that summer slide. We're still reading and doing math and doing those things, so when school comes back in session, we're ready to go. So there's certain things that we know it tends to occur as it relates to their more affluent peers, right? That may have access in their homes to certain things, or some things may look differently as it relates to how are children being prepared for their school experience. So oftentimes there's a discrepancy as it relates to children coming from more of a higher impoverished community, tend to come to school 1 to 2 or even more years behind their more affluent peers. It's not like rocket science. You can see the numbers throughout this country. Typically, kids from more affluent communities tend to fare well on state assessments, on college entrance exams. That has been a phenomena for as long as all of us have been around. So now, how do we begin to address, and how do and we've been dealing with these issues for many, many years. And so ultimately, I keep it simple. Children who come to school behind for whatever reason, whether it be their status, what their dis status or whatever, we tend to have to do two things. And that is to bridge that gap. Okay. We have to provide more time and more support. If children are behind, right, if they're a year or 2 years behind academically, how do you catch a child up? Well, first of all, I need more time. I have to find time to bridge that gap, because they're same period that constantly that gap is continuing to grow. So I have to find more time either during the school day, before or after school, and to try to bridge the gap. And during this additional time, during that, then how do I provide more support for that child to bridge that gap? Obviously, there's different things that we do. It'd be an exhaustive list if I tried to give it to you, but there's many things we try to do as it relates to remediate and accelerate children's learning to catch them up, right? And that's where we find ourselves. If you look at so that's why I wanted to front load the audience with that information. Because if you look at our historically failing campuses, most of or all of those schools or just basically fits that description, right? As far as a high eco dis, typically, so on and so forth. In addition to that, what amplifies the issue, again, it tends to be human nature. Oftentimes it's hard to recruit highly effective teachers to be a partner at those schools. Now, again, I won't dare say all of our teachers at those campuses are not highly effective teachers, but we got to be real about it. And that's what I'm challenging everyone. The current reality is, and oftentimes teachers want to be a part of a winning team. It's a revolving door oftentimes at some of our high needs campuses where, man, you have a lot of novice teachers, uncertified, because it's hard to get a teacher like, whoa, I don't want to go to that school, right? Because of the perception. I don't want to go be part of that team, so on and so forth. And that's just human nature, right? That's just part of it. There's a perception, there's a narrative about a certain school, about a certain community. And then it makes it harder to recruit high performing teachers to go to those schools. And so it just amplifies the issue. So that said, now what's the solution? Now, as we go forward, we've applied for several grants. So what has to happen? We have to find ways to, again, find more time and support for those children to bridge that gap, right? That learning gap that has taken place. And how do we get highly effective teachers there? We have to do some unique things. And part of what the state is helping us to do, and I will applaud their efforts. There's some programs out there we've applied for. We're waiting. I hope to know in February if we are awarded certain grants that we're applying for to be able to pay teachers more. So how you go about attracting higher performing teachers to those campuses, we have to pay them more. Oftentimes they're going to have a longer work day. They're going to have more on their plate. to turn it around. So with more funding from the state, we are able to apply more funding for those schools to attract higher performing teachers to those campuses, to help partner with those leadership, the leadership team, to help turn that campus around. So that's ultimately how we go about it. And that's how the state goes about supporting us in those efforts, is to applying more funding where we can hopefully attract higher performing teachers with more experience and so on and so forth. Because at the end of the day, it's about that teacher in the classroom with those students that make the biggest difference. The folks who are...
I will agree with you on that to an extent. I feel like there's a major role that parents need to be playing as well, because we also set up a culture, a sense of expectations for our young people. Because there are also many people from impoverished backgrounds and countries that we would consider impoverished nations, where with less resources, we see students and individuals from those communities nonetheless striving academically. And here in the United States of America, we can look at our historically Black colleges and universities as an example that often retain and matriculate their students at a higher percentage than the predominantly white institutions that are better funded. Right. And when we look at, for instance, lawyers or physicians or engineers in the Black community, like I don't have all the percentages in front of me, but an overwhelming percentage of them, you will see, got their training at some point, usually at least their undergrad training at a historically Black college and university. So I understand and I agree with you on the statistics in terms of the challenges that poverty presents.
Correct.
But I feel that we also have opportunities that we're not harnessing. And I'll give you one really quickly. I'm looking at the time and I want to hear from you on so many other issues.
Sure.
As a parent who would attend back to school, meet the teacher nights, right? For my children in elementary and middle school, I was always amazed at how we wasted that opportunity. It is the one time that you are going to get the most percentage of parents, even more so than awards programs, because not every awards, and all parents don't show up for that. But it would have been, for me, I always saw it as an opportunity to help the parents understand, here is where we are. Here are how we measure these benchmarks for your children. Here are the roles that we need you to play. By the way, bring out your devices. Let's walk you through how to understand Schoology, the app that we use to kind of correspond with the school and see what is going on with our kids. I think that there's so much that our parents don't even understand. You know, why is this child coming home with homework? Why is it important at the elementary and middle school levels for this child to have 20 to 30 minutes of reading a day? Oh, and by the way, your teachers have books that you can take out, the children can check out over the weekend. Here are the incentives we have. I don't feel like we're engaging our parents as well as we can.
Sure, if I could interject. So
yes.
I will tell you, I believe our schools, I won't say it's perfect, but I believe they're trying very hard to engage parents. So to go back to your initial point, parent, absolutely. I would be remiss. It goes without saying, I'm not focused on parents because I can't control that. So and I think oftentimes that's what happens in schools. We get stuck on things that are out of our control. I can't control the environment children come from. I can't control who they were born to. We can only prepare and control once children come into our building. And you're absolutely correct. It starts with parenting. That's the most important, obviously. I'm talking within the context of schooling. The teacher is critical to student outcomes. And as it relates to absolutely, we want to partner with parents, and we certainly would love if parents would be more plugged in and not all. Let me be clear, we have some great parents. Many of our parents are plugged in. But again, being transparent, we do have some absentee parents. We do have some parents that don't show up for various reasons, and for perhaps good reason. I don't know their work schedules, what have you. So there's many reasons perhaps why parents don't show up. And there's different reasons for that. But the reality is this: when we can't necessarily control that. I wish, and many of my principals would tell you, when we have certain programs, we would love to have more parent involvement. Oftentimes, those numbers are very, very small as it relates to the participation in those types of meetings. But again, I applaud the parents who do show up, but we would love to have more. But my point is, we have to control what we can control. And when the children come into our building, we have to find more time and more support in bridging that gap. But again, if let's look at the data doesn't lie. You can look at it, it's pretty evident. And it's really common sense to again, it's not about children not having the capacity or able to do it. But the reality is, how do we respond to children coming from certain environments to our school system? Again, if you go
and providing mental health.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And if you look at any system, you can look at all the data throughout the state or throughout the country. Typically, you're going to see a huge discrepancy of more affluent communities versus more impoverished communities as it relates to student outcomes and high stakes testing. And why is that? We could get into all the why and all that, but how do we as a school system respond to it and help those children? I was one of those children, right? So it's not about excuses. It's more about how do we respond to it? How do we involve, and how do parents get involved and help support the children? How do we bridge that gap and close the gap of those children as compared to their more affluent peers, right? And so but I think your question, Alton, was what are we doing for those campuses? And
so we've got about 9 minutes left, and we still have
go ahead.
A couple other issues.
Go ahead.
So really quickly as well, you had mentioned some of the security challenges. Of course, you brought up the unfortunate death of a young girl last school year, and then we've already had some challenges this school year so far, and even how that influences teachers and staffing and so on and so forth. But certainly how the perception of the schools, the learning environment for our students. If you could just quickly touch upon that, what are some of the things that the school district is doing to try and address these security issues?
Yes, and obviously our parents are aware. We've instituted detection device systems. I would say that's the first. Nothing's perfect, and I should have started with, first of all, there's no silver bullet for all things school safety. But I can tell you, we're trying different measures. It's going to take a comprehensive approach to school safety, and so I won't give you an exhaustive list. But obviously, all of our parents know we're utilizing weapons detection systems that children come in the morning and people visit our schools are going through these systems. We're constantly playing with the settings as we move on in the school year. And those detection systems catch a lot of things. We're also working to improve those systems and working to, but also as it relates to, communications and making sure that, again, our parents, we need all the help for parents. It's so helpful when parents help us in checking students' backpacks. So give you little examples, like, and some of the things we've discovered is innocent, but it's just like kids bring a butter knife or something because they want to cut their apple or spread peanut butter on their sandwich, but we still can't have, and they didn't have necessarily malicious intent, but we still have, those are just small examples of it's innocent, but we can't have things of that nature within our school buildings, right? And so just constantly finding ways. And obviously, when we talk about school safety, we have to be very careful because we can't reveal to the public too much as it relates to some of the plans, because for obvious reasons, right? When you do have bad actors, that's why certain things we have to keep private. But what I can assure our community is that we're constantly talking. We just, in fact, had a school safety meeting yesterday with all of our, Harker Heights and Nolanville and our Killeen ISD police force and our KISD police force and other folks in the room to talk about our current plans and how do we continue to improve those things. So we have communication with all the actors as it relates to and all of our partners throughout the community. and constantly talking about how do we assist. We added 10 what we call, I forget what we call them, but basically safety specialists. It's assigned to so many campuses and helping to support those campuses as it relates to investigations and helping them to be more safe, ensuring that our doors. Of course, we know school shootings have been an issue nationally, and so going through, and I'm proud to report. If the community is not aware, the state of Texas do safety audits throughout the school year, and they're unannounced for every school district in the state of Texas. They come through, they check doors, make sure doors can be open, and so on and so forth. I'm proud to say we've had 20 so far this year, and we've gotten a perfect rating on those 20. We haven't had any dings, so I'm proud to share that.
That is great news.
Yeah, because they're looking for things as they should.
As they should, because we know that the shooting in Uvalde, part of the issue was that a door was closed,
wasn't closed
the way that it should have been. So we've got just a couple minutes left.
Okay, sure, go ahead.
We did not get into. I really wanted to talk to you about the different Senate bills and House bills that have come down from our legislators and how the district is responding to that. Maybe you will accept an invitation to come back later to have a conversation about everything from the discipline to making sure that you guys pay for the 10 Commandments to be in every classroom. And I just have a question. Will it be okay for Muslims to hang up their version as well? I mean, it's like crazy what's happening in our community. But in the last couple of minutes that we have, what would your last words that not last, but for this particular interview, what would you like to leave our audience with? Those parents who are saying, I still have comments, questions, or people in the community, I don't know what's going on, talking about this narrative, just in the last couple of minutes here, what would you like to say and how can people engage with the school district?
Sure. I would just like to say it's a shared responsibility. I keep saying that. And when I say that, I don't mean that the school system, we're passing the buck or somehow. I promise you, we hold ourselves accountable. I'll be held accountable. It's just part of what we do. But I will want to say that we can't do it alone. We have to have everyone to take on this responsibility. Again, as parents, as your children exit your homes in the morning to come to school, we just need your help. Again, checking backpacks, ensuring your children are ready for school, doing your part to partner with us so your children are safe, and help us to create a safe environment. It starts as they're leaving home, coming to our schools, and so that would be very helpful. And we also ask that our parents participate. Again, more parents participate in their educational process. Again, showing up for meetings, showing up to the things that we need to show up to as it relates to support our children's educational journey, especially at our school improvement campuses. We need all hands on deck with our parents. And then lastly, I'll say our partners. We need partnerships. We need assistance. We need help. Again, school is much different than it was today than it was 20 years ago. Schools are doing way more than we used to do 20, 30 years ago. And so we're providing so many services, whether that's mental health. There's so many things that children are coming to school. And so oftentimes before we can get to the ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, we're dealing with other concerns and issues that we truly need support with and partnerships with. And again, I appreciate all the folks who've extended an invitation to help and assist. And I look forward to continuing to meet the community members and our potential partners and what have you. So with that said, we have a lot of work to do. And I have no doubt that we will get to a place, we will improve on those things that we're having challenges with. And again, I remind the community, there are some positive things. Let's help each other to share our narrative with the positive things that's happened. And we will also be transparent at those things that are not going well and continue working toward improvement.
Thank you, Dr. Davis, so much for taking time out today. Thank you for the work that you're doing on behalf of our young people. We certainly want to see you successful, because if you're successful, that means our young people are successful, and that means our community as a whole is successful. So for all of you who have any concerns, hey, listen, it's very easy to be that Monday morning quarterback, right? Or now they play football all week long. Understand
Right.
what I'm saying? Get involved. Be part of the solution. Don't just complain about what's going on. Thank you again, Dr. Davis.
All
And
right.
everyone else, like, share, and continue to support us. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Bye-bye.
So for those of you who are watching on the YouTube side, you're getting a little bit extra than those who listen on the radio station. Of course, I just concluded my interview with Dr. King Davis, who is the superintendent. Well, he's the interim superintendent, but also the lone finalist for the superintendent position for Killeen ISD. Then really the conversation I had with him are conversations that you could be having with your superintendents, with your educators, wherever you are. Some things that I wanted to mention, but we couldn't really get to in terms of time. I think it's too late to register for this event, but it's one that you might want to get on your radar if you're in the field of education, and that is the Center for Black Educator Development. Go to their websites. They actually have the 8th annual Black Men in Education convening taking place in Philadelphia. It's happening, I believe, in 2 weeks on November 20th, if I'm not mistaken, through the 22nd. It might be too late to get in for this year, but in terms of teacher shortage and getting qualified teachers and getting the mentorship and the support and the development they need, it is time for us to make sure that we are making those connections with organizations who are doing that work, that we're working with universities who have colleges of education, and we're creating pipelines, that we're giving incentives, obviously, for people to come back and to serve and work as teachers and educators, administrators across the board in our school districts. The other thing I wanted to mention is how incredibly important, we didn't get to any of the House bills, and I have to be careful even with people in positions such as Dr. Davis, not to, we want to push them and we want to support them, but we don't want to so expose them that they get targeted by bad actors. And what I mean by that is we certainly have in the state of Texas, a legislative body that is hostile to public education. That is just what it is. That truly knows that education is, as Malcolm X would say, the passport to our future. And they are figuring out ways to strangle public education, to limit what kind of education people get, the quality of education they get, because they know that it has an impact on the quality of life, particularly for Black people. Now, the statistics show, so don't come for me, that you can be a white person with just a high school diploma and still out-earn a Black person with a college degree. That's racism. That's a whole other issue. But just in terms of the opportunities that getting properly educated provide for you, for Black people, education has definitely been a pathway to our liberation on all kinds of levels. And the same is true for any other group of people, particularly non-white people. And so when you look at the history of public education, it's important to understand that it was the freedmen, right? The formerly enslaved Africans who fought for and advocated for public and free education for everybody, that everybody else has now benefited from, except we now have these oligarchs and many of you who are voting against your own interests in the name of Christianity or whatever, that feel that the only way to advance your agenda is to put your proverbial feet on the necks of other people. And I'm saying, can we live and let live? Like, you want private education, fine, and fund it. Pay for it. If I want private security for my home, I don't get to pull taxpayer dollars for public safety and say, nah, I need private security, so limit the number of public officers, public safety officers we have out there. Take some of the money that would help fund public safety officers for everybody and use that money to fund my personal security. You see how stupid that sounds? Yes, that's exactly what we've done with education. Now, one of the ways we counteract that is, first of all, to get educated ourselves. But the other thing is to elect people into these decision-making positions who know what the, I would say, hell they talking about. And so we have an opportunity in Central Texas, the area that I'm in, and where this show comes from, to elect two former educators in Don Richardson, who's running for House District 54, and Amelia Ray Broker, who's running for House District 55. Certainly look at their records, engage them, but understand that you cannot say you want change and keep electing into office people who do not have an understanding of the area, and yet wanting those people to make decisions that impact those areas. Does that make sense? So we have a lot of work to do just in terms of educating ourselves, but also in terms of understanding that we are responsible for ourselves. Nobody is coming to save us. If we don't want to take the time to set up some standards in our homes for our children, regardless of our economic status, if we don't want to take some time to set up for our children what we know their culture should be, how they respect elders, right? I tell my children, I expect you to conduct yourself in a certain way. And if there's a teacher or a staff member who comes at you sideways, you let me know and I'll handle it as the adult. You don't go into the adult sphere, right? That's what you've got me for. So do your part. So when I go to fight for you, I can trust how you showed up and I can properly advocate for you. And so as we talk about Killeen ISD and all the challenges, we didn't get into special education at all, which is a huge issue. And by the way, is an area where these private schools that are now getting our taxpayers' dollars, they don't have to provide all the special education that public schools are required to provide. They do not have to accept your special needs child. They do not have to engage in all of these IEPs. Yes. So you might want to do your research first and understand how. Let's say you move your child to these schools, and I'm not saying you shouldn't. Everybody make your own decision. And as you heard in that conversation earlier, I've made many different decisions for my children over time. But understand that they take a snapshot of enrollment at a certain time. And if at that time your child was in a private school, but then the private school decides we're not offering that service, so we don't want to deal with your child, and they kick your child out, and you now come back to the public schools, your money doesn't come back with you. And I've seen that happen so many times over the years, not just in the Texas school districts, but in other school districts as well. So we need to be mindful about what role we are playing in gutting our public education and how important our public education is. Over the next few weeks, I hope to reach out to an incredible lady who oversees all the guidance counseling for Killeen ISD. I was recently at a conference and heard her speak, and I think there's a lot that parents don't know is available for us and for our young people through the school district. And I'm going to try to bring her on so that she can speak to you and share some of her knowledge and let us know what resources are out there. And so if you have another area of Killeen ISD where you feel, hey, we want to engage, maybe we want to bring in the director over the special education department, let me know. Just send a message to Rethinking Freedom at AYANELI.com or leave a comment on our YouTube channel and we will circle back because our goal is to serve you, to get all of us to really rethink what does freedom mean and what are we going to do to bring it about. All right. Well, thank you all for listening. And until next week, I am Fabarinelli with Rethinking Freedom. Please like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell. And hey, y'all, we are trying to reach 10,000 subscribers by the end of this year. I think we're at about 8,700. This could be a done deal today with just all of you sharing information to your different platforms, letting the people you know that letting them know that this is a platform they want to follow because we always bring you great information. And we could just like that hit the 10,000 subscribers. So let's make it happen because we are doing good work in the community and I hope you agree. Thank you.